Today on Locked On Rockies, a couple of listener questions to kick off the week, including what would it take for the Rockies to land some of the biggest free agents?
You are Locked On Rockies, your daily Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Rock on Rockies fans, welcome into the Locked On Rockies podcast for today, the 11th day of November in the year 2024. I'm your host of the Locked On Rockies podcast, Paul Holden, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. And if your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot, because that's what we do around here each and every day, free and streaming on your favorite streaming services and on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel, where you can be part of the show. You can fire off your Rockies hot takes. You can let me know what's on your mind, just like all of the folks that chimed in today and asked us our questions that we're going to talk about today, all on the episode, because it's kind of setting the people are curious as we're getting into kind of the doldrums here, a little bit of the offseason, as things heating up for some, cooling off for others. There are some big names that the Rockies, technically, until these players sign, could be in the market for. But let's face the reality of the situation. Not looking likely that Juan Soto or Roki Sasaki is coming to the Colorado Rockies anytime soon. But we're going to play a little hypothetical. We're going to talk about what it would take, what would it look like to get those caliber of players to Colorado. We'll dive into that, as well as an interesting question here about playing in the snow. What type of impact that might have. So a couple of listener user questions here, because remember, all offseason long, this entire offseason, I want to know what you want to hear about. So when you head over to the Locked On Rockies YouTube section, make sure you're subscribing, make sure you're liking the videos, but I want to make sure you're firing off your Rockies thoughts and comments and your questions there as well. That's what I'm doing this offseason. It's all about answering your questions, even some of the ones that might be a little out there, like we're doing today. So don't forget to go and join us there. When you subscribe, when you like the videos, you are really helping the show out. We are on that final push to 1,000 subscribers here. So if you wouldn't mind checking that out and letting me know what you want me to talk about, that way we can know what's going on all offseason when it comes to what's on the mind of Rockies fans. So check that out there on the Locked On Rockies YouTube comment section. And before we dive into everything today, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. That is, of course, our friends at Gametime. So let's start off with a question here from MMMCRCO. On a related topic, I am not delusional enough to think that a big-name free agent will sign in Colorado, but with Soto saying he was open to all 30 teams, what contract terms would it take for him to switch his pinstripes? Yes, the Monforts would never spend, in my guess, is 10 years, $700 million. In all honesty, Soto would have to take that offer and have the Yankees, Mets, or Dodgers match it, or at least get close to it. Your thoughts? And it's an interesting question because, yes, at its core, foundationally, like, there's no chance. As much as Juan Soto said he's open to all the teams. However, the difference between trying to land a Soto, because there's a lot of differences between Soto and Sasaki. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I think I was getting that. But it's not just the money. Because, yes, these other teams have the ability to do more and spend more. The biggest issue facing the Rockies is trying to keep up with these huge brands, these huge moneymakers. The Rockies, this is another situation in which I'm sitting there saying, in order to get this done, it would take creativity, it would take some innovation, it would take investment, because I don't think we'd ever see, like, because 10 years, $700 million is something like, is nuts. It really, like, when you really think about that, what that impact is, and when you think about the Rockies payroll right now, like, and mind you, there hasn't been a lot of people that have, there hasn't been necessarily a huge names other than Chris Bryant there. Because just to put that in perspective, and I understand the difference between those two players. But the Chris Bryant deal was 7 years, $182 million. We're talking about adding on, $617 million to the Chris Bryant contract, which eventually is, right now it's 28 million. Now it's going to be 27 million after 2024. That level, I mean, just imagine that jump. I mean, you're not only doubling probably that weekly, that yearly salary that you're giving to them, that it completely changes the landscape of what the Rockies could do, even if they added Soto. If you add Soto for that hypothetical 10 years, $700 million, $70 million a year, man. That's wild. That is more than double what Chris Bryant would pay. He would be getting paid more than in 1 year of that contract. That's 6 years of Ryan McMahon. That's, start combining contracts and to even get there. That's, the 2 years of German Marquez and 2 years of Daniel Bard and, Charlie Blackmon's last season and Cal Quantrill, basically. So what would it take to land Soto? It would take a completely new look from the Rockies. And I am curious, has Ohtani opened a loophole? Has Ohtani created a loophole for more teams to do the deferred payment? Again, the Dodgers can put themselves in, I think, more unique positions because of how much money they generate, how much money they bring in, and the brand itself. Same with the Yankees. The Mets have an owner that's very wealthy and very willing to spend money. But I don't think, but on the flip side here, as much as it hasn't matched any part of Rockies history. It hasn't matched up of anything. The Rockies eventually are going to have to do another Chris Bryant-esque move. The Rockies are going to have to be a team that comes out in free agency and snags one of the prized pieces. Remember, people were interested in Chris Bryant, not at the level that the Rockies paid him. And more people certainly had their concerns. But the point is, if you're willing to do that for Chris Bryant, there's going to be another guy that they're willing to do that for. And as much as you want Juan Soto, that barrier is always going to exist. But I was curious. I was just wondering what it might look, just to get any sort of basic information about seeing where Monfort might be at where it comes to his businesses and where the wealth might be here. So I just got a little bit of information from Wikipedia here. And again, I'm not an economist. I am not a big numbers guy. So again, all this with grains of salt. This is just me kind of trying to build up a case for why the Rockies could be able to get in on some free agents, could see some more money coming into the club, and why I think that here. So, but again, I'm really just basing it off of just kind of some basic stuff here, just to let you know. So let's see. When ConAgra bought Monfort of Colorado in 1987, Dick became president of ConAgra Red Meats. Dick also owned shares in the Hyatt Regency Indian Wells Resort and Spa in Indian Wells, California, the Hilltop Steakhouse in Boston, and other real estate ventures in Colorado. At the University of Northern Colorado, Dick serves on the board of trustees along with the board of directors at University of Colorado Hospital, Denver Zoo, and the Colorado Economic Development Board. So when I hear all that, when I see all that stuff, I kind of think under the radar, the Rockies could have a little bit more access to their resources. Now, I don't know exactly what those roles and responsibilities mean for the payroll and the bankroll of Monfort and the Rockies. But it does remind you that Dick Monfort is connected to some very big industry, very big business going on, especially within Colorado. And the Monforts themselves continue to have, I'm pretty sure, a growing influence on real estate and stuff that's popping up in downtown Denver, especially the area around the ballpark. And if I do recall, the Rockies have a friendly lease, I'm pretty sure, as well, with the city, with Coors Field and all that stuff. So I do think that there's an argument to be made, or at least some evidence to show that the Rockies could invest more in this team, but without having the same financial security that the massive teams have. The Rockies won't ever be in on Juan Soto, unfortunately. But to answer the question, what would it take to have him change? I think you would have to really convince Soto. You'd have to, well, you know what? Let me hold that thought. Let me hold that thought, and we'll get to that after the break here, coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can get $5 and get because right now new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And remember to please play responsibly. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast for free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where you can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot. Welcome. Make sure you're liking the videos, subscribing to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel so you can be part of the show, letting me know what's on your mind when it comes to your Rockies hot takes and questions. So we were kind of creating the stage, setting the stage. What would it take for the Rockies to land a Soto-style player? And I was leading into it. It's interesting because the money part will always be the biggest hurdle. However, if you're able to do what you did with Kris Bryant, you're able to do that again. Maybe not so much for a Juan Soto type deal, but for these other international players, for these other interesting players, for a lot of players, the Rockies, if they were willing to open up the checkbook a little bit more, could spend to add on some more players. Right now, you're kind of entering a spot where some contracts are expiring and you're figuring out what to do with the Kris Bryant deal. But they are a middle-of-the-road payroll team, and so it's not like the Rockies don't always spend money. It's just in order to bring a Soto in, a player of that magnitude, for the Rockies to be the convincing one, money isn't always going to be the factor. It's going to be obviously the biggest factor, of course. If you have the best deal, if you're offering the best money deal for these players, then that'll always be a convincing argument for them, more often than not. I think Kris Bryant came to Colorado not because he was passionate about the Rockies and all that stuff, but because that's the best deal that he got. But it's more than that. If you're going to convince a Soto level player to come to Colorado, if you are going to convince, if you're going to commit that hard, if you're going to spend that money and make that big splash, you have to prove that your team are winners. And the Yankees the Yankees have a whole long legacy to do that. You can point to the fact that, really since the early 2000s and up until recent years, the Yankees haven't done a lot of winning and stuff like that. And they've won a lot, but not on the big scale that you're used to. And that argument's true for the Dodgers as well. Eventually, the Dodgers are not going to be able to make it all happen. They're not going to be able to keep waving the magic wands and keep everybody. And mixed in with the fact that you keep bringing big personalities in there, it's not always going to work. So those two teams, obviously the big favorites and the big names there. But When the Mets are in there and they have an owner that's willing to spend money and get things done and throw money at the problem, I mean, the Mets are actually a prime example, right? I mean, they turned it around. They started cooking up on a good run, but it was really interesting to have a scrappy underdog story with the team with the highest payroll in baseball. So I'm saying all this because there has to be a bunch of change to the Colorado Rockies before top-level free agents like this would even consider it. Yes, the door's open, but let's be real. Soto ain't going to the Rockies. Soto ain't going to the A's. Soto ain't going to the Marlins. You know, there are teams where Soto's not going to go, and you don't have the benefit because, you know, deep down, the Nationals could be a long shot, but they got the connection there, right? You have to be the team that is so that you got to draft these guys. You got to develop these type of guys too, you know, because you're not always going to bring them in. But I'm going a little over the place. What would it take to get Soto here? The culture has to change. The philosophies of the organization and priorities of the organization have to change. And the team would have to be a more creative team that wins more. I don't think a player like Soto, when I don't think a lot of players when they're entering their big contract year, when they're entering that thing. Well, I guess there's probably two trains of thought, I bet. Chris Bryant took the money in the deal, and obviously he didn't think he was going to be playing through as many injuries and all that stuff as he did. But he looked at the Rockies, he looked at his other offers. And I bet you the Rockies had more of that time, more of that guaranteed money, and more of that things that covers that long stretch of time there. You got to make it an enticing place to be before you can even think about entertaining some of these big names. You have to make it so the Rockies are a team that's fighting close. The dips and, you know, the highs and lows are a little bit more flowing where it's not so much. Right now, the Rockies are very, very much a couple of high peaks, low valley. It's not like a wave where it kind of ebbs and flows over time. The Rockies have been boosh, you know, up there making playoffs, fighting for the, you know, one game away from winning the division, back-to-back 100-loss seasons. Keeping the same manager, keeping the same coaches, keeping the same things, doing the same things over again. If you are a top-of-the-line baseball player, you're looking at Colorado, and if you're not, and if the money part isn't as big of a deal to you, if just making money, getting paid isn't your number one factor, which for some players it is. You look at everything else about the Rockies, and you kind of just roll your eyes. You say, am I going to go there and am I going to learn what I need to do to take my game, to continue my game at this level and then take it to the next level? Am I going to be around a team that knows how to win? Am I going to be able to be the star that I am for this team? Look at what's happening to Mike Trout. Obviously, the health is the main thing that's getting in the way of Mike Trout. And the thing that will be one of the biggest talking points of his career. But Mike Trout has committed wholeheartedly to an organization that has never really figured it out other than the outside. You know, they did win a World Series back in the day, and there's been other flashes of moments. But you have to ask yourself because obviously, again, the money's number one. But why would Soto go to the Rockies? Why would Prime International, you know, why would these players looking for something, looking to make a big splash, looking to win, why would you go to the Rockies? This is why this whole topic brings it back to why I believe the Rockies need creativity, need to be a team that looks at baseball differently than other teams, invest in analytics, but invest in analytics that can find ways to help you succeed using your unique situation and your unique home environment. you'd have to convince Soto of the core. You'd have to, because you'd need data to be like, here's how we handle the Coors effect. Here's how we handle it so you can hit on the road and not. Going up to pitchers. Here's how you handle. Here's how we know what works at Coors Field. Here's the numbers and the data and everything that we've done that shows we can help you get these results. We can help you be consistent. But I don't think the Rockies have any of that to convince players that if they come to Colorado, they're in a spot where they can play elite level baseball. Like if you were to come into the Rockies right now, say the Rockies do somehow sign Soto, right? Obviously, interest in the team increases dramatically. More people will watch the team. Absolutely. But what does Soto make the Rockies an immediate contender? Do the Rockies have enough to compete with the Dodgers and the Padres and the Diamondbacks and whatever the Giants look like next year with all the changes they're going through? No. The Rockies' problems are so much deeper than just adding a big level named player. They need to build out a roster that has the depth. They need to see, they need to continue to grow these young guys. And soon, in reality, I would say, like, if it was to be on my timeline of when you would want to make a big splash move like this to add a player of Soto's quality, of his quality and that commitment that you would need to him, probably be next year, next free agency period. I'm curious what year 3 looks like for a lot of young guys. I'm curious what the debuts will look like for some young guys. And of course, you want Juan Soto over, out of basically anybody in the league. But my point is, if you add Juan Soto and then you just kind of have a bunch of meh surrounding him, it ain't going to help. Remember the last time the Rockies had a top of their level player and didn't build around them, didn't add more, and didn't invest and spend big on a team that they had the foundation to spend around. Remember how that panned out. So I think for the Rockies to get a deal done with Soto, it's not just about the money. It's about proving to an elite level player that the Rockies that they will help create the winning culture. They will be part of a new era of Rockies baseball. They will etch their name in the halls of someone that went to a team like the Rockies and helped them get to greatness. Because if you're a player that comes to the Rockies and is successful and changes the mindset of people within and outside of the organization and help lead the Rockies to victory, that will certainly add to your legacy. But why would you do it in Colorado when you can go sign up and be a part of the Dodgers and be part of a dominant team, one of the, or the Yankees or the Mets or the Padres? Why wouldn't you go to these places that have been focused on winning, mixed in with places that have huge influence in the world of baseball? It's a tough pill to swallow, but I don't know when the Rockies will ever be in on a deal like for either of these guys. Maybe sooner rather than later, but the identity of the Rockies is such a difficult selling point. Being, there's so many things that the Rockies have to deal with as an organization and improve on, that I think you need to focus on before it even comes close to the Rockies having a shot at some of these big name free agents. But what would it really take? It would take a convincing deal with a lot of money and a young team that is showing that they're on the right path. I think free agents were interested in coming to the Colorado Rockies after the back-to-back playoff years. I think that was the type of thing you need to start showing and highlighting in order to convince people to get the job done. Because say the Rockies are able to match any deal, right? Say they're in on, they are somehow able to do the 10-year $700 million, which they're not. Would Soto choose to go to the Rockies over any of the other teams that have matched him? And I think the answer to that question is no, he wouldn't. I don't think there's anything about other than, hey, hit at Coors Field for half the season, that would convince Juan Soto right now. Until the Rockies as an organization change, I don't think you're going to ever see these big free agents. All right, real quick, one more fan question to wind out the show today. Let's get to that coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Before we do that, though, got to tell you about the folks that help make this show possible, and that includes Gametime. I love Gametime. Why? Because Gametime makes it super easy to get tickets to where you need to go. You have this new feature called the Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I've used Gametime before. It's so easy to use. Fire up the app, look for seats. Could be before the game, could be right up to the game, could be even just a little bit after the game, and they got you covered with great deals, and not to mention a little bit other amenities on the app that help things out, like the all-in pricing feature that you can toggle on, and you're going to show all the price up front, no hidden fees, no nothing, and you're going to get a panoramic view from your seat when you're picking out the seat. My favorite feature, so you know exactly where you're going to sit, and know exactly what you're paying for when you use the Gametime app. Now, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime Picks. Download the Gametime app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. That is code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on the Gametime app. Terms do apply. Download the Gametime app. What time is it? Game time. This is the Locked On Rockies podcast. We're free and streaming on your favorite streaming services, bringing you your daily Colorado Rockies talk right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can find your team every day. If your team is the Colorado Rockies, guess what? You're in the right spot. And we're answering and talking fan comments today, listener comments. So remember, if you want to fire off your Rockies hot takes, head on over to the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Let me know what's on your mind this offseason when it comes to the Rockies. FNL Aviator says, hey, Paul, I know this isn't maybe in the theme of today's discussion, but I was thinking, granted, it's later in the month of November and odds won't be in our favor, but I'm thinking how cool it would be one day to have a World Series in Colorado in November and a snowy game, like baseball in snow and in Coors' best World Series, I think. Unfortunately, most of our franchise postseason games never got beyond earlier October, besides 2007. I don't think it snowed in Denver for game 3 or 4, but it was close. I think most of our games in the snow is usually in April, etc. Yes, that's true. And I was at the Phillies series, not 07, the 08 one, or whenever the 09, I'm sorry. And that was cold. I don't think it was snowing, though. I think it was just super, 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 super cold. And it would be cool. It would definitely be cool. However, I wonder what it would be like for the players, because we've seen Rockies players even struggle. We know how often it is for players that kind of start a little bit off in the cold. I think there's a prime example in, like, German Marquez, I think, historically has struggled when it's cold and when it's snowy. But when you're talking about a really cool backdrop, when you're talking about a really cool way to set the stage for a crazy World Series game, the November snowstorm for the World Series could be really fascinating. And I wonder what that looks like, right, in terms of grounds crew and game, right? We're familiar with rain. Obviously, early in the seasons, we're familiar with the snow games and stuff, but, like, what would it look like? Because, I know I'm not local out there right now, but, Colorado just got covered, blanketed in a bunch of snow, and I wonder what that would look like if the World Series had, if that type of level of storm, which we know late October, Halloween in Colorado can certainly be a snowy time, what that would look like. As for, you would hope that the Rockies would be in a better spot, right? Especially if they're playing a California team or playing a, I guess, could they play a California team in the World Series? I guess the Angels, the Athletics. I'm trying to think yet, but the other ones, no, not really. It would be interesting because the Yankees were arguing, thinking that, right? We're going to be back in New York. It's colder. The Dodgers going to struggle a little bit. I think quite to happen. So I don't necessarily know. Me personally, I am not a cold weather athlete. I hated playing sports in cold weather. I hated football in the cold, especially hated baseball in the cold. When you're, if you make bad contact and your hands just feel like they're going to explode because they're cold and the vibrations are sending it through there. So I don't necessarily know what that would be, but man, it would make for some cool pictures. Man, it would make for a cool environment and atmosphere. Absolutely. So I don't know. I don't know what that would be, but that would be pretty cool. I think that would be a really, really interesting a mix up. And I think that would it would be really interesting. How much does that factor in for teams like California, Florida teams, kind of teams that play in nicer areas, nicer environments throughout the season, Georgia, Atlanta, all that good, those type of teams. I do wonder what that dip in weather, what that change in weather does mean for them. And, the weather does impact, and the air temperature and all that impacts the ball. So that'd be an interesting mix up as well. So good question there. And you can keep firing off your good questions all off season long on the Locked On Rockies YouTube channel. Be part of the show. Check out the videos over there. And folks, thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day, because that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Rockies. Thank you so much again for joining us here. For your second listen of the day, go check out Locked On MLB. Our pal Sully's got you covered for all things Major League Baseball. And man, what a tough day for the Broncos yesterday. Not tough. I mean, it was all the way right up to the end. So close. But Locked On Broncos has got you covered all season long. Locked On Avalanche, Locked On Nuggets. Of course, 2 seasons shaping up to be really interesting and exciting for those 2 teams. And the Colorado Buffaloes, one of the most exciting teams in all of college football. Locked On Buffs available there as well for you to check out. Folks, that is going to do it for me. Thank you so much for making Locked On Rockies your first listen of the day. And until next time, I'm Paul Holden saying so long from the Locked On Rockies podcast.